Hey everybody, Spency Boy back at it again. Sorry for the little delay in videos there. Had a bit of a snowstorm blow in. My apologies. So first of all, if you want to get in the Discord, all you got to do is DM me on Instagram at Spencer Turley, no spaces and no capital letters. You'll find my page. Just DM me on there. Tell me you want to get in the Discord and I'll get you in there, bro. Okay, so MXGP Pro versus MXGP 2020. And this is an interesting little video here because you've probably seen some of those people go out there and make videos like MXGP 2019 versus MXGP 2020, right? Like you've probably seen a couple of those out there already. But I wanted to change it up a little bit here and go a little further back to MXGP Pro to give you a little bit more of a, a broad comparison, more of a, a bigger scale of how Milestone has kind of started to change their games and things like that. Oh my God, here we go back off to the, the pop-off everywhere. Holy crap. Man, this game was no joke for sure. If you do not land that jump literally right in that little landing pocket, like you're screwed, bro. There's no chance of saving it. So either way, I thought this was a different, kind of a different, interesting type of video here, trying to compare like the newest Milestone game back to MXGP Pro, because really like MXGP Pro was the first real different game from the first three MXGP games, and then they went to MXGP 2019, which was different than MXGP Pro. But to be completely honest with you, like MXGP 2019 and MXGP 2020 are not all that much different from each other. So to try to do like a versus between those two, it's kind of a whole different type of a comparison, right? What I'm trying to get at is how Milestone has really started to change their entire like speed of their games, and how slow they're making their games feel, and how small they're making the jumps and all that kind of stuff. So you can see here, I'm on the little Supercross track here on the free ride track of MXGP Pro, and right away, I mean, if you just recently played MXGP 2020, you should right away be able to see the difference in how much I'm getting off of the ground on these jumps in comparison to MXGP 2020. There is something in MXGP 2020's air physics that it's like this super gravitational pull or some shit. I don't even know what it is, but it's like that constant feeling of like you can barely get off of the ground. And don't get me wrong, MXGP Pro has its own issues. I mean, as you can see, like a couple of these places where I'm just barely over jumping and popping off the bike instantly, right? Milestone seems to struggle with that balance. That's my biggest thing I wanted to kind of get across in this video. That's what I think Milestone is struggling the most on with their games, is that balance, right? Like trying to make it skill gapped in where you can pop off the bike if you way over jump something or come up short on a huge jump. You want there to be a possibility of popping off the bike, but at the same time, you don't want to pop off all the time everywhere on every little 2-foot double MXGP Pro, right? So, but you also don't want it like MXGP 2020 where it's like you're just not going to pop off anywhere. You can overjump anything. Oh, and by the way, there's not even really a jump big enough for you to even potentially pop off on MXGP 2020 anyways. But that's, these are like the two different ends of the spectrum. That's the way I would compare like MXGP Pro and MXGP 2020. So first of all, let's just take a little look here on MXGP Pro, the game that came out 3 games ago. Before MXGP 2020, let's just take a little gander here, okay? Let's go down to race options, all right? Weather, you have clear, cloudy, rain, wet track, and random, all right? So, if you haven't noticed this, on MXGP 2020, when you go into the weather options of the race options, you will find clear and rain. And that's it. In their newest 2020 game that came out 3 games after this, 2 or 3 games after this, and they just totally took out the cloudy weather effect, or weather condition, whatever you want to call it, and they totally took out the wet track weather condition. So all you have in MXGP 2020 is just rain and clear. You just have less options. You just have less different variations to the way the tracks can look in the game. It's insane. That is so lazy, Milestone. Like, what the crap? And on top of that, you actually have Ghost in the time trials of MXGP Pro. You do realize that, right? So, time attack, okay? You have Ghost leaderboards. When you go in there, you have different Ghost options. Yeah, there's no Ghost in MXGP 2020. There's no Ghost. There's no wet track and cloudy weather effect that you had all the way back in MXGP Pro. Okay? So, just kind of, got to point those things out, because some of you boys act like Milestone's just doing nothing wrong and Milestone's so amazing and oh my god, Milestone's so great, right? So you can see down here, Ghost visibility, no Ghost, all this shit down here. There's no option for any of that on MXGP 2020. None. There's no Ghost in MXGP 2020 time attack. Period. Okay, so if you played MXGP 2020 here recently, you should be able to notice right away the difference in the speed feeling of the game, how fast the game feels. This shit's literally twice as fast feeling as MXGP 2020. Twice as fast. This actually, to me, feels like more like what it would look like speed-wise when you're wide-ass open on a 450, on a tapped-out modified 450. It actually feels like you're moving in the game. Whereas MXGP 2020, it feels like you're barely even moving when you're wide-ass open. It feels like you're just in slow motion. Slow motion for me, move it, slow motion for me, right? That's what MXGP 2020 feels like. So when you compare these two games directly, it's insane. I would 10-to-1 rather play a game like this just because it feels like it's got more fun factor to me. Instantaneously feels like it's got twice the fun factor than MXGP 2020. And fun factor is just so important, man. It really is, because you can have the best physics in the world, you can have the best graphics in the world, whatever you want, right? But if your game is not fun, if it's slow, if it's boring, it's just not going to have that replayability and that longevity and that, making you want to come back and play the game. That's one thing at least I can say about MXGP Pro. The speed feeling of the game is there. It doesn't feel like you're in quicksand or some super high friction based. Now, you're going to pop off on some places that it just seems like impossible that you would ever pop off, like literally on a 2-foot double, you're going to pop off. There's going to be some weird janky moments with playing MXGP Pro, don't get me wrong. So, like, MXGP 2020 definitely is, it's like, they've tried to fix upon some of those, janky popping off on every 2-foot little double, some of those weird little janky feelings to MXGP Pro. Yeah, they definitely did fix upon some of those things, but in the process, they also made the game literally feel twice as boring by making everything slower and making everything like, not pop off anywhere. Yeah, it sucks popping off every once in a while on these stupid little 2-foot doubles and shit on MXGP Pro, but at least there is a chance of popping off. And at least you do feel like you're coming off of the ground when you hit a jump and you You feel like you're actually going some kind of speed on the track. Whereas with MXGP 2020, it just feels like you're barely moving and you're barely coming off the ground and you're never popping off anywhere. So straight up, right off the bat, I'm just going to tell you I'd rather play MXGP Pro than MXGP 2020. So here we are in MXGP 2020. First of all, I have to say, do not let the graphics trick you up. This is what Milestone is like built off of, okay? They improve their graphics and improve their graphics. And what it does is it tricks your mind into thinking that the gameplay is actually better, when in reality it's not. It's just the graphics that's better. So it's tricking you into thinking that the gameplay itself is better when it's really not. Like, I guess my point being is, if you took this kind of graphics and you threw it into MXGP Pro, you would think MXGP Pro is better. Period. No doubt about it. No doubt about it. With the speed filling of the game and how much you're jumping off of the ground and all that kind of stuff. And by the way, I have this in the exact same camera mode, you know, the more zoomed in camera mode that I had in MXGP Pro. So you can see here, this game has a lot more of a zoomed in camera mode, and it kind of looks like it's more like more down to the ground. So with MXGP Pro, even with the more zoomed in camera mode, it's like twice as zoomed out as this, and it's a little more up above the bike. This right here is almost so zoomed in that you can't even tell what the heck's going on. It's kind of weird, like the back wheel will kind of jump out of frame. Your back fender will get completely out of frame. So, like, yeah, I can go to a totally different camera mode here. They have a more zoomed out camera mode like this, but, like, this is, you got to understand how this is way zoomed out, you know? This is not the normal camera mode of the game. This is, right? And this is the exact same camera mode I was on in MXGP Pro there. So, this is kind of Milestone's little tactic of, let's change our camera up a little bit. Let's zoom it in and, you know, make it lower to the ground so it makes it look like it's a different game, right? They got to do all these little tactics because their games are so damn similar every year. They got to do these little tactics to trick your mind into making you think the game's really like a different thing when it's really not. This is very, very similar to MXGP 2019. Very similar. But I just want you to pay attention to how much slower I'm moving on the bike. This just feels like you hit this absolute plateau of acceleration in this game. It just feels like it's like you're going the same speed the entire time, no matter how fast you're going. No matter if you're, you know, full throttle, you know, fourth gear in the game, it feels like you're going just as fast as when you're barely putting around. There is no, like, going from slow to fast speed in this game feeling at all. There's no real, like, momentum, you know, that kind of kills your whole feeling like you're gaining momentum on the track. It just feels like you're, in the way they design these tracks, smaller, more cramped down, higher friction to the dirt, slower feeling just in general with the game. This game just feels slow the entire time you're playing it, which then makes it feel more boring, right? Whereas, like, I feel like with the first Supercross game, if you guys remember my review on that, I feel like that was too fast of a feeling. It just felt like you were going laser lightning fast, warp speed everywhere, even when you weren't going very fast in the game, you know? Like, you felt like you were just going fast everywhere, and that can give you a bizarre feeling too. It's all about the balance, guys. This is what Milestone is struggling to figure out here. It's like, you know, the first Supercross game felt too fast, so then it didn't give you a feeling of like going from slow to fast, because it felt like you were going fast everywhere. And then with MXGP 2020 here, it just feels like you're going slow everywhere, even when you're going fast. But I feel like MXGP Pro kind of has more of that in the middle, more of that medium speed feeling, you know, so it gives it more of a natural, normal feeling to it. I feel like that's why I prefer MXGP Pro's speed feeling, because it's more of that in the middle. And that's what you have to find. You have to find that balance with game design. And they still haven't found that here with MXGP 2020. Yeah, the pop-off system was crazy on MXGP Pro, but they've pretty much reverted all of that and just made it to where you never pop off anywhere. Now we're back to square one where you just never pop off anywhere. You know what I'm saying? Like, the only time you're going to pop off in this game is if you hit a tree, or you hit like a literal rock object or a stick object on the free ride track. That's the only time you're actually going to pop off. Like, these jumps are not big enough. You don't even have the potential to overjump something in this game because you can't even go fast enough. You can't even carry enough momentum to even do that. You know, you see what I'm saying? And like, you're not going to slide out in the corner. You're not going to get going too fast in the corner to where you kind of like cross rut or you know, like high side or anything like that. You can't even go fast enough in the game for that to even happen. So it's so slow in no jump size or skill gap or big enough jump scaling, not enough of a speed filling to this game to where there's just nothing to the gameplay. There's no substance to the gameplay. At least I can say with MXGP Pro, there's some kind of substance to it because it feels like you're actually going some kind of a speed. You know, you can pop off in MXGP Pro. Granted, you pop off too much and you pop off on stupid little shit, but at least you can pop off, right? Like, I would much rather have a popping off too much versus never popping off anywhere, right? I would much rather have a little bit more of a janky feeling, but at least some kind of a speed feeling to it versus feeling like you're barely moving, right? I would always prefer janky and fun factor versus boring, but a little more polished physics. You see what I'm saying? I would always prefer towards the spectrum of some kind of skill gap and fun factor, because that's really what keeps you coming back, versus this just boring, no skill gap, no speed to the game. And that's one thing I feel like with what Reflex did so good. It just found that perfect balance. Like, Reflex has so many levels to its, like, going from slow to fast, like I'm talking about, that momentum gaining, momentum carrying thing to Reflex is just so much fun. It's just such an experience to that game. In Reflex, like, you know, you're not going to pop off on every little 2-foot double like you would MXGP Pro, but you can pop off in Reflex, you know. If you go 100-foot over jump a freestyle or a free ride jump, you're going to pop off. And sometimes you're going to pop off on standard rhythm section jumps. And Reflex just had that perfect balance to everything. The skill gap, but not too much skill gap. You know, still felt like an arcade motocross game, but it still had, you know, some depth to it and replayability. And, you know, it was easy to get into, but it wasn't like just this boring experience. It had a speed filling to it. It had bigger jump scaling. It had an awesome, fluent, flowing, not a weird filling to the whip system. You know, it had all that kind of stuff. As you can see here, we've rode like, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 laps on this thing, and I can't see anything on the track. Not even visually. Terrain deformation on the track. I can't even see anything. You guys remember when I was playing MXGP Pro, at least you could see the couple of ruts that it was making, and when I would bank into some of those outside berms, it would kind of dig that rut into the outside berm, that terrain deformed rut, but there's none of that here. There's no terrain deformation in this. This is probably the lowest terrain deformation in any milestone game that I have ever seen, excluding like the first couple of MXGP games. But since they really started putting the terrain deformation in, you know, like back with MXGP 2 or 3, this is the lowest of any of them. I can't even tell it's doing anything at all. There's that weird little jank-ass trying to be like a slide-out system, but it just feels shitty. So yeah. You know, that's kind of your difference. Like, yeah, this game looks better graphically, but they just took the terrain deformation totally out. They took the different weather conditions totally out. They took Ghost completely out. And it's a slower, more boring, lower skill gapped experience than MXGP Pro. So, either way, that's my opinions on it. This game was just, I don't even know what this shit is right here. This is just the epitome of that repetitive, trying to push another game out. Let's make it a next-gen, eye-candy, better graphics game, but the gameplay is just 2 steps backwards. It really is. This game, if this game would have had the speed filling and the track scaling, you know, like how big the jumps are and how, you know, like, it's like this game, you just can't get going fast anywhere with the way they design these tracks. It's like the length of the straightaway to the corners is just not long enough. You're just constantly hitting the next single or the next hill. You know, this corner right here should have been swept out further to where you could really get up to speed more. You know, if this game would have had more of that speed feeling of MXGP Pro and, you know, more of the jump skill gap and the momentum carrying feeling of MXGP Pro, this game would have been pretty solid. Like, you know, if you'd have mixed this game with MXGP Pro, like you took the graphics of this game and threw it on MXGP Pro and eliminated some of those like popping off everywhere kind of feeling to MXGP Pro, it would have been a pretty decent game. But now they're like on these weird ass roads of making it like where you just don't pop off anywhere anymore. You don't really slide out and fall off the bike anywhere anymore. There's no roller skill gap or whoop skill gap. And even when you hit rollers in this game, your momentum just gets totally dragged down. Like you're just barely moving. I don't understand the game. What the hell was the game development and design decisions behind that to make this game feel so slow and so much fucking friction to the dirt? And so much of a, like, super high gravity feeling when you jump in the air and when you're going over rollers, it just robs every bit of momentum that you even thought about having. It's just so weird. But either way, straight up, you know, I'm one of those kind of guys, I can see past the graphics. I can see past the graphics of the game to see the actual gameplay and the skill gap and the replayability of the game. And straight up, like, I would rather play MXGP Pro than this. There's no doubt about it. At least there's an actual Supercross track on MXGP Pro, and at least it feels like you're actually coming off of the ground on MXGP Pro and actually, you know, moving in the game, somewhat decent speed filling in the game, and at least there's actually some kind of a terrain deformation in MXGP Pro. Granted, it doesn't really grab you all that good, but at least there's something there. This just has nothing, man. But either way, that's my comparison between the two games. A lot of stripped out features of MXGP 2020 that a lot of you guys might not have even noticed right off the bat. But man, this game is something else.